J'ouvre maintenant cette séance. Bienvenue dans la...
Welcome to meeting 105 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, November 20th, 2023, the committee meets today to discuss its study on the accessible transportation for persons with disabilities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application.
Is equipped colleagues with a sophisticated audio system. Feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is an earpiece worn too close to a microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise a high degree of caution when handling the earpieces, especially when your microphone or your neighbor's microphone is turned on. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of our interpreters, I invite all participants to ensure that they speak into the microphone into which their headset is plugged, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table away from the microphone when they are not in use. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses for today. First, from Air Canada, we have Monsieur Michael Rousseau, President and Chief Executive Officer, by video conference. Welcome to you, sir. David Rowe, Vice President, speaking in English and French today, mixing them up. David Rowe, Vice President, Government and Community Relations. Tom Stevens, Vice President, Customer Experience and Operations Strategy, by video conference, as well as Kieran Wilson, Director of Customer Accessibility. For the second half today, we will have with us from Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, Professor David Lepofsky, who is the chair. And of course, from the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, we have Heather Walkus, who's the national chair, joining us by video conference. We'll begin with our verse panel, however, and for that, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Rousseau for 5-minute opening remarks. The floor is yours, sir.
Is he close?
Perhaps someone else from Air Canada, Mr. Stevens or Mr. Rowe or Ms. Wilson would like to provide the opening remarks on behalf of Mr. Rousseau.
Can we just...
Or we can suspend for 2 minutes. Okay, why don't we suspend for 2 minutes to ensure that we have no issues with relation to Mr. Rousseau? So we will do that. We'll suspend for 2 minutes and give a chance for Mr. Rousseau to take his chair and check the AV. This meeting back to order. And once again, I will turn the floor over to you, Monsieur Rousseau. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci, bonjour. Let me assure the committee, people with disabilities, and the Canadian public that Air Canada takes very seriously its obligations to ensure our services are accessible. We want to be the preferred airline for people with disabilities. Nous investissons déjà de ressources importantes pour l'accessibilité et nous
We already invest in accessibility, and we can do better.
carries hundreds of thousands of customers who require mobility assistance or other accommodation. We invest significant resources in accessibility. We have been and will continue to be a leader. In January, we became the first carrier in North America to adopt the Sunflower program for customers with non-visible disabilities. And we're also the first in Canada to enable customers to track their checked mobility devices in real time. In addition, we've updated our policy around priority boarding and storage of mobility aids. Also, at the start of 2024, we created a customer advisory committee comprised of representatives from 4 Canadian accessibility groups. We were a key participant in drafting the Canadian Transportation Agency's mobility aids and air travel final report. We are proud of the contribution to this government-led initiative. Air Canada was one of the first airlines to waive liability limits in international treaties to pay the full cost for damaged mobility equipment. I sit on the board of the International Air Transport Association, which represents 250 airlines worldwide. Air Canada was a key member of its Mobility Aid Action Group. We endorsed the Accessibility Canada Act and its goal of a barrier-free Canada by 2040. As part of this, we publicly filed the 3-year accessibility plan, which we are currently implementing. Our plan includes 145 far-ranging new initiatives based on a year of research, expert consultations, and feedback from travelers with disabilities who took over 220 flights. We've been pleased to provide a copy to the committee members for your review. Our employees, third-party international contractors, and the entire leadership team have a high awareness, a strong work ethic, and deep empathy for this very important customer segment. Hundreds of thousands of customers requiring assistance successfully travel each year. In 2023, across our network, we received nearly 1.3 million special assistance requests from our passengers. Based on the number of incidents reported, the vast majority had a positive experience. In terms of those requiring wheelchairs and mobility devices, in about 0.15% of these instances, customers contacted us to report a negative experience. Overall, our records show that in 2023, about 100 accessibility-related complaints were filed with CTA related to our services. This is not to minimize the number of incidents, nor the serious impacts disruptions have on the individuals involved. But it's an important context that indicates, first, we do a good job, and second, more importantly, we need and will continue to get better. Our industry is more complex than others. However, I believe that if all our partners work together, we can remove all barriers for air travel. While the causes behind these negative experiences differ, we have concluded the chief issue is inconsistency. And the best remedy for this is provide our people who all want to do a good job serving customers with more and better tailored training and tools so they succeed every time. For example, our 10,000 airport employees will receive extra disability-related instruction as part of a new recurrent annual training program. Apart from reinforcing processes, it will promote better understanding. In addition, our frontline and management groups are required to complete a specially designed training program put together with expert advice, which includes content on the principles that all persons must be treated with dignity and barriers removed. A good parallel is airline safety. Incidents still occur, but aviation today is the safest mode of travel. This was achieved through our industry's willingness to examine and learn from mistakes, to constantly refine processes, adopt new technology or add redundancy, and through continual and better training. We are well aware of the effects that disruption has on our customers with disabilities. When we fail, we are incredibly disappointed because it affects a person's quality of life. In these cases, we apologize and we take responsibility. However, what we hear is that our customers' overriding concern is always that we act to make sure whatever happened to them does not happen to others. This is why our leadership team and all employees at Air Canada are committed to improve. And we are striving each day to deliver a positive experience for every customer. We know we must and can do better. Nous sommes prêts pour répondre.
We're ready to answer your questions.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rousseau. Before I turn the floor over to Mr. Stroll, I just want to apologize to one of our witnesses today, who I believe I mispronounced your first name. It's Carrie Ann. I want to make sure I get that on the record. We'll begin our line of questioning today with Mr. Stroll. Mr. Stroll, you have 6 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the folks at Air Canada for being here today. We've heard, obviously, from a number of Canadians who have had difficult experiences, and I think probably the person for whom this study was, why we kicked this off was a high-profile case of Stephanie Cadieux being without her specialized wheelchair for a time when that was left behind, and she talked about the difficulties that brought upon her. And we've heard again from numerous people how a mobility aid is not simply like a piece of luggage. It is an extension of a person. It is what allows them to have independence, and how upsetting it is, both physically. It can take days to recover from having to use a non-specialized piece of equipment, and I think there is also a mental component. It's once again those folks being subjected to being second-class citizens. So I want to understand from Air Canada's perspective how you are going to ensure. I heard the stat there. That you shared, 0.15%. How are you ensuring that gets down to zero? And secondly, as part of that, what is the response from Air Canada when this happens? You say you have lessons learned. What happens when this is so high profile, and you say that you have already taken steps to increase training and have a sensitivity towards this issue? What happens when an Air Canada employee fails in their duty to serve a person with a disability? Is there a reprimand? What are the steps that are taken to ensure that this is treated with the seriousness that it deserves?
Well, thank you for the questions, and I agree with you on your points. In regard to the first question, what are we doing? A lot of these situations happened before we initiated a number of changes as part of our accessibility plan, which was posted last June. In terms of mobility aids, now we've changed our policies to be much more customer friendly. One, if we can put the mobility aid in the cabin of the plane, if it's foldable, if it can fit, we will put it in the cabin of the plane. If it can't fit in the cabin of a plane because it's too large, then it will go in cargo. It will go in as priority, so it will go in last, and it will come off first. Two, customers have the ability to go to a mobile application and monitor the status of their mobility aid in the cargo to make sure it's on the plane. And three, to protect the mobility aid, in many of our planes, we put them in different compartments by themselves. In the planes that don't have separate compartments, we pack it separately, so it's not part of the other cargo on the plane. So we believe these measures will minimize, if hopefully eliminate, some of the situations you've heard of in the past. On the second point you've made, first of all, we call all customers who contact us with a negative experience. Carrie Ann can certainly expand on that, but she speaks to them about their experience and gets feedback, and then we incorporate that in our lessons learned. In regards to an employee that made a mistake, like in safety, we want employees to tell us what's going wrong, and that's a non-punitive issue. So we will train that employee to a greater degree. We'll put him or her through special training, reinforce the training. If that person is not, not great at that job or does not continue to improve, then we may reassign that person. But we want to first start with training of that individual to make sure that they understand the processes, that they're sensitive to the needs of the customer, and then we'll monitor the performance of that employee on a go-forward basis.
One of the things that we've heard in this study is the different models that are used around the world, including the European model, where it's actually the airport that is responsible for getting an individual who requires extra assistance from the curbside to the airplane. What is your view of? Do you feel that approach, that sort of a system, would prevent some of the failures that we've seen over the last number of months, in that there's perhaps less opportunities for someone to be lost in the handoff between security, et cetera? And it also would mean you'd have, right now, I'd assume at an airport like Pearson or Vancouver, dozens of airlines, each with a different approach to a person with a disability. What is your view on going to an airport service delivery model as opposed to every airline having a different approach and having that responsibility to get the individuals onto their aircraft?
Thank you. It's a very interesting concept, and of course, Air Canada has experience flying around the world with both models here domestically and outside Canada. Again, it has merit. I think it certainly has merit for smaller airports in Canada to consolidate services. We'd have to spend some more time thinking about the larger hubs where there's much more activity. It would require a different level of coordination between different partners, the airport and the airline. I think those are all areas that we should spend some time looking at to improve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russo. Next, we have Ms. Koutrakis. Ms. Koutrakis, floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing here before us today. We've heard time and time again at this committee and, in the news that it's not a surprise to anyone that there have been incidents where, passengers with disabilities feel that their experience is not what it was sold to be. So I'm interested to find out from you, what have you added in your training to the employees that was different before 2023 and with your new training program right now? I heard in your testimony, Mr. Russo, that it's an annual training. Are there any thoughts to perhaps increasing the frequency of that training? And what specifically are they being trained on?
Well, thank you for the question. And so it is annual recurrent training. If we require more training, then certainly that's an option for us to put in place. Certainly all new employees would receive the training, and all existing 10,000 at least employees would receive the annual recurrent training. As to the actual details behind the training, it's basically two different buckets. One is process, what has to happen, what has to occur to ensure the customer has a positive experience. And two, sensitivity, the needs of that customer, the fact that that mobility aid is critical to that customer. And so those two aspects are kind of the two areas of focus. But if I can easily refer the question to Carrie Ann, who's much closer to the training program, and provide you a little more detail.
Thank you very much for the question and for the opportunity to speak before you. As Mr. Russo explained it really is those two kind of categories. But something that we think it's important to point out is that the regulatory requirement is only every 3 years. And this is a decision that Air Canada has made to go well above and beyond, because we believe that it's really important to keep hard skills and soft skills fresh. We're also trying to take a more holistic view so that it's not just a training session that people go to, attend. We really want it to permeate throughout their job. And so we've started looking at different ways to allow our staff to interact with customers. Just as one example, we had a customer workshop a couple weeks ago where we had 2 customers come in and meet directly with a wide range of staff, management, frontline managers, frontline staff, to really have that personalized connection to our customers to understand what it is to travel. In this case, it was traveling with a mobility aid, a power mobility aid, understanding that human aspect of it. So we're really looking at how you can scale up that kind of training approach to all of our employees.
So for the longer term and for people, Canadians with disabilities or traveling on Air Canada, I'm just looking for some insight as to what your business plans are or what they include for future aircraft infrastructure. We've heard from passengers with disabilities that they are calling out the industry for not considering the needs of passengers with disabilities in the design of aircraft. In particular, it's duly noted by many advocates that washrooms are not designed for use by anybody who is not in perfect physical condition, and they are certainly not wheelchair accessible. These same advocates also speak loudly of the need for aircraft to be able to accommodate passengers to stay seated in their own mobility devices. As you can imagine, passengers who are traveling with these disabilities, it speaks to their dignity. What kind of commitment can Air Canada do today when they're considering the design of their future fleet that they can help these passengers fly with the dignity that they deserve?
Well, thank you for the question. A very complex area and a very important area to take accessibility to another level. There are many safety issues about putting wheelchairs on planes. Seats, we go through a very, very complex regulatory review of the interior of the plane to make sure it's safe for all customers. So that's one aspect that we have to always adhere to. On the one that you mentioned about washrooms, so you're absolutely right with your comment. And our team, Carrie Ann and the team, are speaking to Boeing and to Airbus, the 2 principal manufacturers of airplanes, especially about our narrow bodies, which are those smaller planes, which are more difficult to get into, about redesigns to allow a wheelchair or a customer with a disability into more comfortably into that washroom. That work's underway right now, so we're committed to continue to work with Boeing and Airbus to see if we can find a solution on future planes, or maybe even remodeling existing planes in the near future that would satisfy your question.
35 seconds, Ms. Koutrakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And very quickly, I was just wondering if you'd be able to talk to us a little bit about the resolution of complaints. What happens from the minute someone makes a complaint to resolution? How many, and if you don't have time to answer during this, perhaps you can send us information later. How many complaints have you received since 2023, and how many have been resolved?
Right. Well, again, based on the 1.3 million requests for accommodations, we received about 2,000 complaints overall in 2023. Each of those are resolved different ways, either personally through Carrie Ann or through our customer relations department. But certainly, we can send you a more detailed process list of how we handle those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Rousseau, and we would very much welcome that information. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelo-Duval.
Mr. Barcelo-Duval, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses, specifically Mr. Rousseau, for being here with us today. Of course, today we're here because there have been a number of cases, many cases over the last few months and in the last year, of individuals with disabilities having a hard time, in fact, a harder time actually at Air Canada than elsewhere. You are aware of the cases. I think it is important to note them. Something fell on the head of a passenger who was using a respirator. He forgot to bring on board an individual's wheelchair. A person fell out of the arms of an Air Canada staffer, despite the fact that there was an individual who had to drag himself out of the plane because there was no assistance for him. There was a complaint from the Paralympic Olympians who were saying that there's a generalized problem at Air Canada. In your opening statement, you said it amounts to 0.15% of situations that end up like this. I'm wondering, how can you explain the difference in perception between what would be maybe 100 complaints according to you and actually a large number of events that have been in the media and elsewhere for the last little while? My perception is it's much more broadly the case than 15%.
Well, thank you for the question. And so it's 0.15%, 15 basis points. And I take your comments. It's probably underreported. I understand that, but that's not the issue. Our issue is we know we need to get better. We're putting a number of initiatives in place to minimize, if not eliminate, these occurrences. We run a very complex industry, as I spoke about in my opening comments. It is very emotional at times as well, because obviously customers want to get somewhere with everything they brought to the airport, and so I think my belief and certainly the team's belief here is that we will get better. We are getting better with the initiatives we already put in place that we've outlined. We are now putting customers with disabilities on first on the plane. We are putting them at the front of the cabin, so that makes their situation much more easy. As I mentioned earlier, we're dealing with our mobility aids much better than we have been in the past. We're training all our people. We put it in the Sunflower program for hidden disabilities, and we're continuing to consult with well-respected disability groups to get better. And so this is a continuous improvement process. But again, I think we do a good job to begin with, but we need to do better.
Oui, parlant de besoin de faire.
Speaking of the need to do better, I think that the point you raised about the fact that there may be an underestimation of numbers of cases, there might be a higher number than what has been reported. One individual appeared before the committee said that as a person with a disability, every time she has to take a flight, she expects to have a problem. It's not as though she may have a problem, she's certain of it. I find that fascinating. When you look at the reported cases in the media, you can see that Air Canada seems to be highly overrepresented. We commend the initiatives that you are intending to implement and that you've already implemented. I think that has to be recognized. That said, recently, it has to be said that you were before the courts. There was a challenge, the Transportation Safety Board asking you to allow for wheelchairs into the cabin and to have planes that would be able to accommodate travelers. Let's say something were not available, that there could be a switch in planes so that these wheelchairs could enter the cabin. How do you explain the fact that you say that you're making efforts, and that's what you've been communicating, but on the other hand, you're challenging the orders from the Transportation Board that would be supportive of individuals with disabilities?
Again, thank you for the question. The case you're referring to goes back to 2016 when Mr. Rose wanted to go to, I believe, Cleveland, and we couldn't fit his wheelchair in the small plane we had at that time. We wanted to accommodate Mr. Rose. We actually worked with him to see if we could put him in a limo to another airport. We looked at another flight. We looked at alternatives for him to get there and with his wheelchair. And so when the CTA came out with their ruling, we disagreed with it. And so it's nothing about Mr. Rose or about our commitment to getting customers with disabilities to their intended destinations. We didn't agree with the CTA's recommendations or rulings, and so the only option we have is to go to court or appeal that ruling. And so again, you need to separate those two issues: our commitment to getting customers with disabilities to their intended departure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rousseau. Next, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Russo, in your opening, you chose to cite the percentage of trips taken by people with disabilities that resulted in a complaint, and you cited the number of 0.15%. And it makes it sound like a small problem. It seems to diminish the importance of the issue. I'm wondering why you made that choice in your opening remarks.
Well, I think right after I presented the numbers, and we want to be transparent with the facts that we have. That was one of the purposes and objectives of coming to the committee and to anyone we speak to about this very, very important situation. My next comment was that I'm not diminishing this issue. We are spending time, effort, investing to get better. We know, despite the numbers I presented in my opening comments, that we need to get better. And again, I've given this committee at least half a dozen significant process changes that we put in place in the last 6 months that will make it better. And we'll continue to make process changes and invest in training, especially to ensure that we minimize, if not eliminate, these mistakes that we made.
I guess what I'm wondering, Mr. Russo, is why you didn't start by saying we have a big, serious problem. How much money did Air Canada make in 2023?
In 2023, we made roughly $2 billion.
$2 billion. And how much money did Air Canada invest specifically in improving the experience of people with disabilities?
Again, that's a fair question. I don't have that number at the tip.
Does Ms. Wilson have the number, perhaps?
I don't have. No, we don't have the number. And the reason for that is that we do have, certainly we have numbers where we invested in equipment. We have a labor force that's dedicated to this to some degree. But there's also many other costs that are built in other costs, technology, training, that we need to pull out to get a fair number. But I would estimate that if it's not in the tens of millions, it's certainly in the high millions of dollars investment per year.
Do you track those investments? You said earlier that you're investing significant resources. That statement must have been based on something.
Well, we're training 10,000 people a year now on annual recurrent. That is a significant investment. For one example, we're buying new equipment to more Eagle lifts, for example, for more airports and for more redundancy. Well, that's another investment that we're making. But beyond all that, there is a series of technology improvements that we're making as part of overall other programs that are hard to pull out. But again,
Mr. Russo, would you be willing to pull those numbers together and table them with the committee? I think it would be very edifying and useful for our study.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and I'll take that back and see if our finance and other groups can pull together those numbers where it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Later in this meeting, we're going to be hearing from two representatives of prominent disability advocacy organizations in Canada. Neither of them have been contacted to provide input on Air Canada's accessibility plan. Would you be willing to meet with these individuals personally?
Again, we've put together a committee of 4 well-respected disability groups: Barrier Free Canada, Brain Injury Canada, Spinal Cord Injury Canada, and Karula, and hopefully I pronounced that right. But certainly, we're willing to speak to other groups as well, and whether it's myself or Carrie Ann, who's obviously our leader in this area, our director of accessibility. Certainly, we would we would look forward to meeting with anyone, including your two next guests.
Yeah, that would be fabulous, Mr. Russo. I had a chance to meet Mr. Lepofsky from the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance. I notice he's wearing the Order of Canada pin. We're also joined today by Heather Walkus from the Council of Canadians with Disabilities. I know both of them would very much like to meet with you and discuss your company's plans. So if you could arrange that, it would be much appreciated. The last question for this round is around voluntary versus obligatory actions by airlines. We heard from WestJet at a previous meeting. We heard from Air Canada today. There are voluntary actions that the airlines are taking. My question is whether that's enough to ensure a consistent experience for people traveling with disabilities. Should we not consider strong national regulations that are properly enforced so that there aren't laggards in the industry that aren't taking these voluntary actions like the ones you've outlined and like WestJet outlined?
That's a difficult question for me to answer. Again, I'm looking at it from Air Canada's perspective. We're committed to this, and you've heard all the actions we're putting in place and our commitment to continue to improve. Hopefully other airlines follow our lead, and certainly we're willing to share with other airlines our processes as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russo, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. We'll begin our second round of questioning with Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chair, and my question is to Mr. Russo. Yesterday, Canada's Minister of Transport got up and he jumped to his feet and said, I know, we'll have a summit, because that has worked so well, of course, with auto thefts, which we heard from the police chief in Toronto today are actually up again. And according to his own words, he conferred with a cabinet colleague, and they said there must be action now. And they set a date of May 9th, 2 months from now, for this action now, which one can imagine will result in a report with a fancy cover and logo, perhaps the 9th of September, followed by some implementation of some recommendations, perhaps the 9th of March next year. So I guess my question is, what would you see is the point of a summit? Because you've already talked about some of the actions that you've been taken, and we've heard from WestJet on some of the actions that they've been taken, and we can sit here and question whether that's enough or fast enough or you care enough or taking it seriously enough. But what is the point of a summit 2 months from now to take immediate action other than a photo op to make it look like the Liberals are doing something about a problem they should have dealt with years ago and pretending to care about it? So what is your comment on that? What is the value other than a photo op?
Thank you for the question. I think there's value. There's always value in sharing information among participants, and just not airlines, but other modes of transportation as well. We can all learn from each other. And certainly to increase, and although I believe this important area has a very high awareness, it will continue to maintain its high awareness level. But again, I think sharing information and sharing processes and sharing lessons learned is always a positive thing.
Okay, so I guess in 2 months we'll share some information. To Ms. Wilson, it was referred to that you actually call and take feedback from those that have had negative customer experiences. So maybe, and I imagine some actions are taken in response to some of those. So maybe there's an illustrative example that you think would be a good one that had a good outcome, and you could expand on that a bit, just so we understand sort of the processes and the steps.
Sure, that'll be my pleasure. So as one example, if a customer, if I hear about an incident either through one of my airport colleagues, or it could be another colleague who's received an email that gets sent to me, I look at it as a first glance, and then I always have help figuring out what happened, getting feedback from either the airports involved or on board the aircraft. I reach out either through myself or through one of my colleagues, a senior colleague in customer relations. We have a very dedicated team that works on accessibility. But the point of having those phone calls is really to understand directly from the customer what the impact of the incident was on them. And often, even though I've seen some of these incidents before, I learned something new that I've never heard before. So as one example, I spoke with a customer who just put it extremely succinctly. Whenever they travel, this was someone who uses a powered mobility aid. Whenever they travel, they're going on vacation. Their vacation doesn't start the same way that it does for us when we turn on an out-of-office message, for example. They are not on vacation until they arrive, and they have been reunited with their power chair. And so that small explanation of reality for a person with a disability, the value often comes from my ability to then take those examples back and share those with all of my colleagues. It really changes how we view things.
Do you use any specific examples in the training? And do you give feedback to the Air Canada staff that have been involved in that situation?
So yes, just to repeat the question for the recording, what do I do with that feedback? Absolutely. So what I will do is make sure that whatever staff was involved is given that feedback. Okay. We often validate, this was the experience for the customer. It might not have seemed that way to you, but this is how they lived it. I will often look at the training curriculum, see whether there's something missing in training, or in some cases, like we spoke about earlier, the frequency of training, the way that training is delivered. Often we'll see that the point in question was covered in training, but perhaps not in a way that really resonated.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson, and thank you, Mr. Muse. Next, we have Ms. Murray. Ms. Murray, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. So congratulations on Air Canada's leadership on the Sunflower program. I was happy to hear that. And also the comment that Mr. Russo made that we need to get better, especially process changes and training. So thirdly, there is a commitment to being a leader in accessible travel and employment on your website. And so, Mr. Russo, what are the metrics for being a leader in accessible travel and employment? Have you identified, and in what time frame are you aiming to achieve them?
Well, certainly thank you for the question. Certainly from a customer perspective, we are looking at 2 areas. One, obviously, number of complaints as a percent of customers traveling with disabilities, and continuing to improve that year over year. The second area is we are exploring looking at doing some surveys of our customers with disabilities. As you've heard, Carrie Ann speaks to many customers, but we'd like to speak to as many as possible to provide feedback. And so the scoring on that survey would also indicate to us internally as a benchmark as to how we're doing, and more importantly, how we're improving. So that's certainly from a customer perspective. From an employee perspective, one of the measures we look at is the percent of management that has a disability. And so we measure that internally. We ask our employees for that information. That's probably underreported, but today, roughly 5% of our management group has a self-declared disability, and so I think that's another important measure from an internal perspective.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, because that's was my second question. How many of your personnel and contractors in the training activities, whether it's design, planning, or delivery, are persons with disabilities? Because, of course, they would naturally have an affinity with the trainees and probably be effective.
Again, thank you for the question. I don't have the exact details on the training staff as to how many have self-declared disabilities. I can tell you overall at Air Canada, we have roughly 2.2% of our staff overall, the 39,000 employees that we currently have, that have self-declared a disability. We think that's underreported. But it's higher than the average for the air transportation area, which I believe is roughly 1.9%. But I can certainly take it under that. We'll get that information back to you as to the Pacific training staff, the people that are involved with training others. How many of those people have a self-declared disability?
Well, thank you, and congratulations on having that be something that you measure. So to what degree do you have goals in your hiring, and what are your objectives in terms of number of percentage of personnel at Air Canada with accessibility challenges?
Okay. Again, thank you for the question. So we have a very strong DEI program here at Air Canada that looks to improve the hiring practices to ensure that we have a strong representation of all minority groups, and that includes employees with disabilities as well. I don't have all the stats right in front of me, but certainly. And we do measure ourselves against the greater air transportation industry on all the DEI dimensions. And our current status, from my memory, is we're okay, but we need to get better. And so there will be changes to hiring processes to ensure that we do get better.
So a last question on that.
Unfortunately, Ms. Murray, we don't have time for another question.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Murray, and thank you, Mr. Russo. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll admit, Mr. Rousseau, that I'm somewhat disappointed, despite the announcements you've made, and Air Canada's commitment here seems more serious, or it's as though there's more awareness about the importance of addressing these shortcomings for people with disabilities. Nevertheless, when there are court cases, people are simply asking to be respected and to maintain their own dignity. When the company doesn't want to ensure compliance with these orders, I feel like that's sort of sending the wrong or an odd message. I'm not satisfied with the answer you provided to my last question. Before I close, because I don't have much time, I also wanted to address another issue. Not so long ago, a report was tabled by the Official Languages Commissioner regarding 30 complaints that were evaluated as to providing services in French. When we talk about providing services to clients, of course, we also talk about French language services, and the Official Languages Commissioner provided a dozen or so recommendations, and among 10 of them that were issued by the Official Language Commissioner's Office, Air Canada had not implemented any of them. I understand you are learning French right now. Do you not think that that should just be a given, that Air Canada would implement recommendations made by the Official Languages Commissioner, as it should be the case, to follow the orders from other agencies?
Again, thank you for the question. I'll address the second part first. I mean, certainly we're very proud to support both official languages, to be the only carrier in Canada that does provide service in both official languages. And this file, obviously this area is very, very important to us, like accessibility is, but they are different. And we will read the commissioner's recommendations, and we will have a discussion with the commissioner as to what we think of those recommendations. And but that is a completely different
Thank you.
course of action versus accessibility.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russo. Next, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Wilson, I know Mr. Lepofsky provided you with a brief prior to this meeting, and in that brief there are 19 recommendations from his organization, the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance. Have you had a chance to review the 19 recommendations?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, I have. As was alluded to before, or perhaps that was in private conversation, Mr. Lepofsky and I have known each other for a couple of years. It was great to hear from him. I appreciated the heads up on the brief. It was only yesterday, so I have read them over. There are some that we have already started working on, so that was quite encouraging to see that we're aligned. I think the best way to accomplish something real and exciting in accessibility is to work hand in hand with the disability community.
Thank you. Mr. Russo, there are other jurisdictions that have stronger regulations in some respects when it comes to people with disabilities. For instance, the committee has heard that in the United States, all of the complaints that are submitted to airlines are handed over to the federal regulator. In Canada, there's no such obligation, and so we essentially have to take your word for it when it comes to complaint data, and every airline reports it differently, and we know there are a lot of instances that go unreported. This is what we've heard from disability advocates. Should Canada not have a system of reporting and transparency that's at least as strong as that in the United States?
Thank you for the question. I think that's a worthwhile venture to explore. There, obviously, it has to be some conditions around it. How the data is put together has to be consistent across just not the airline industry, but also other industries that provide customers with disabilities the ability to travel. I think it's unfair to only point out the airline industry. There should be others that should be included that if we wanted a full view of customers with disabilities who want to travel. And I think, much like safety, the information that's provided has to be provided in a non-punitive awareness, because our objective here, our joint objective here, should be to improve the travel experience for customers with disabilities, and so that information will be transparent to all, and initiatives will come out of that information that will improve.
Thank you.
So being non-punitive is also a very important aspect.
Thank you, Mr. Russo, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. We have 8 minutes left, and I'll split the difference. Mr. Strahl, you have 4 minutes for your questioning, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to use my time to move a motion that members of the committee would have received on Friday. And the motion states that given that A, there is very limited transit infrastructure in rural Canada, B, electric vehicles are often not a feasible option in rural Canada, C, rural Canadians often have no other option than to drive gas and diesel-powered vehicles in order to commute and operate their businesses, D, the Liberal government plans to increase the carbon tax by 23% on April 1st, the committee report to the House that it recognizes the disproportionate impact that the carbon tax has on rural Canadians and calls on the Liberal government to spike the hike and axe the tax. Mr. Chair, I think that this is our only one of 2 meetings that we have in the entire month. It's one of the last meetings before that April 1st tax hike comes into effect. The 23% carbon tax hike comes into effect. We know that we do have Minister Guilbeault coming before the committee to explain his No New Roads policy, which will also have a disproportionate impact on rural Canada. So we think that we can have a vote on this motion to send a strong message from this committee that we believe that the government's 23% carbon tax hike will have a disproportionate impact on rural Canadians, and we don't want to see that happen. So I think this is a good opportunity for members, especially those of us that represent rural Canadians, to let our views be known and send that message back to the government. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
very much, Mr. Strahl. Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I don't. I disagree. I think this is bad timing on the Conservatives to bring such a motion up. We're trying to concentrate on the disability community as well as Air Canada to deal with an issue that has been front of mind for many people throughout the past few years, especially because of the latest incident. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't think today we have time for that. I think we want to stick to the issues at hand that this meeting was here for, and maybe Mr. Strahl wants to re-entertain that at a more appropriate time. So I'll move to adjourn debate on this motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Badaway. We'll vote by hand. All those in favor of adjourning debate? All those opposed?
7 years, 4 years.
Motion to adjourn debate carries. So we will continue with our line of questioning. How much time did?
You still have
Okay, so you have 2 minutes, 30 seconds, Mr. Strahl.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rousseau, a lot of the incidents that we heard about involving Air Canada, some of the most high-profile incidents, the one I'm thinking of happened in Las Vegas, at the Las Vegas airport, where there was someone, I believe, that had to drag themselves through the cabin to get out. Obviously, you're dealing with, I assume that's with a contractor outside of Canada. How does Air Canada, how have you revised your approach to dealing with foreign private contractors that you have to rely upon? Have you changed your approach, and if so, how?
Thank you for the question. So, a couple aspects and you're absolutely right. Outside Canada, everything is third-party contractors. So we've strengthened the contract with our third-party contractors, where there is clear standards to perform. And just to provide some insight, in that situation in Las Vegas, that contractor, just not for that mistake they made, but others, was terminated, and we brought in a new contractor. So it's really about training and ensuring that we have a strong contract that has penalties and standards of care that are consistent with what we're trying to do in Canada.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I guess the final question that I have for you is, what is your when will you be reporting back on the progress of all of these initiatives that you have? Obviously, we've heard the desire of this committee to have information provided to us on some of the progress, some of the investments, spending that you've made. How do you report back to internally and publicly on whether these initiatives are actually meeting their goals? We heard today from the Auditor General a bit on, well-meaning programs are fine, but the reporting and the measuring of the impacts are also important. So what are your, how are you reporting back to Canadians on whether or not the things you're putting in place are actually making a difference for passengers with disabilities?
Okay. Well, thank you for the question, and a very, very interesting question. So internally, certainly our senior leadership group, including me, gets data on a regular basis on how we're doing, both in terms of the initiatives being put in place, the adherence to those initiatives, and of course the number of complaints, which hopefully is declining as a result of these initiatives. So that's internal. External reporting, we really haven't talked about much internally, but it is a good reminder to me to look at that situation as part of an annual report, or part of a proxy, or part of an AIF, or all the other public documents that we provide that the public does know that we are doing better. We certainly have some literature in some of our public documents now about accessibility, but it does not include many numbers, if any. I think your point is well taken that that should be enhanced as time goes on with
Thank you.
some numbers as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russo, and thank you, Mr. Strahl. And the 4 minutes remaining is yours, Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to start off with a statement followed by a question, Mr. Chairman. What I'm most interested in, Mr. Russo, is the harmonizing of procedures based on the harmonizing of standards. Frankly, it's not just about the airlines. It's an end-to-end experience for the customer. That includes all the partners from the time the individual gets to the curb until the time they land and get to their destination. With that said, there's an expected level of service that all providers are going to be at the table with. And once again, to harmonize those procedures based on harmonized standards is extremely important. Although Mr. Muse and the Conservatives don't feel that or don't value public consultation and consultation with the partners, we do. Hence the reason why on May 9th we are going to have that consultation, call it whatever you want, an accessibility summit, public consultation. Bottom line is that we're going to be discussing with all partners the level of service that is expected, and with that, reaching for those outcomes that we want to establish. So my question is, do you feel that during this process, Mr. Russo, that the airport, CATSA, CBSA, international partners, airlines, and of course, most importantly, the disability community, this would be an opportunity to, in fact, work towards harmonizing those procedures based on the standards established, and then, of course, with that, a strategic plan, action plans, and, of course, executing the deliverables established out of those action plans. Do you think that will, in fact, accomplish this?
Thank you for the question. Certainly, I think it's a good start. A lot of work's going to come out of that because, as you said, it's complex. But certainly, better coordination between the partners will result in a better experience for customers with disabilities. I firmly believe that.
And I guess how much time do I have, Mr. Chair? Oh, great. And I really want to emphasize this. You know, this is about two things. It's about caring and it's about respect. And at the end of the day, we want to ensure that before the sometimes iron fist goes down with respect to decisions that can be made, like the motion that was just brought forward, we have to consider the consequences of those decisions. And with that, recognizing that mobility aids are not just luggage, rather an extension of one's body and as well their independence. So I guess my second question, Mr. Russo, to you is what, and I'd like to get a bit granular on this, what have you moved forward with now, which is tangible, and what can you bring to the table as part of your sector with other partners to actually move forward with reaching those outcomes that are expected by the disability community?
Thank you for the question. So in terms of mobility aids, what we've done recently is changed our policy where we are allowing as many mobility aids as we can into the cabin. And so the customer has it close by. That's in place right now. Second, we've built a technology application where customers can monitor where their mobility aid is, ensure it's in the cargo bay. And then within the cargo bay, two important aspects. One, mobility aids will be treated as priority, and so they'll go on last and come off first. So they're available for the customer when the customer comes off the plane. And two, and this is an important area, we have changed our internal processes to try and isolate the mobility aid so it does not get broken or damaged. As you know, planes do hit turbulence once in a while, and so we want to make sure that that mobility aid is strapped into the cargo bay, either by itself or away from any other cargo that exists to minimize the risk of damage. So I think those are four strong initiatives that we've already put in place, and we'll continue to look at more, working with our partners and working with experts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russo, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Rowe, Mr. Stevens, and of course, Ms. Wilson, for your testimony today on this very important study. I'm going to suspend the meeting for 2 minutes to allow for our team to introduce and set up the next round of witnesses. This meeting stands suspended. This meeting back to order. Colleagues, for the second panel, we have appearing before us from Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, Professor David Lepofsky, who is the chair. Mr. Chair, I want to thank you for being here. And of course, from the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, we have Ms. Heather Owakis, who is the national chair, joining us by video conference. Begin with opening remarks, and for that, I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Lepofsky. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and I want to thank the excellent team of law students from the law school at Western who've provided tremendous support for what I'm going to say. Anything that's wrong is my fault. Anything that's right is their fault. Enough is enough. As a blind person, I dread entering Canadian airspace. I never know whether the service I'm going to get for basic accommodation needs that are well known and easy to provide will be reliable or pathetic. We heard from Air Canada today that they're doing a good job, that they've put in place measures that are needed to fix this, that the problems are few or infrequent, and that really all they need is more education or training for their staff. Every single one of those statements is wrong. And that Air Canada's leadership said this is proof that we need far more systemic solutions. Let me offer you some. Number one, the U.S. has a Air Passengers with Disabilities Bill of Rights. Why don't we? It is absurd that on a flight to Atlanta 3 weeks ago, my email from Air Canada told me about the American Bill of Rights, but nothing about the services available as a blind passenger in Canada, even though I'm on record and file as a blind passenger. We need a new regulatory agency to oversee accessibility of air travel. The Canadian Transportation Agency has had this mandate for not years, but decades. They have failed, and they are failing. And it's because they're too close to the airlines. Keep leaving it with them, you're going to keep getting the same results. How surprising is it that so few of us file so few complaints with their process? If you read the accessible air travel regulations they passed in 2019, they are more loopholes than rules. The fact of the matter is, they read like they were written by the airlines. How about another basic solution? Easier than changing the regulatory requirements or regulatory agency. How about requiring airlines to automatically tell us passengers with disabilities what services they offer, not having to go running around their websites, one airline at a time, hoping we can find it, hoping it is up to date. Oh, and assuming that we have a computer and can afford it and have adaptive tech and can use it. How about mandatorily requiring something like the U.S. Bill of Rights for passengers with disabilities? How about telling us in every notification who to call for a support, who to call for curbside assistance? This is not rocket science, but they don't do it. How about having one-stop support? How about having a fast action, fast service disability hotline at each airline? You phone it and you don't wait on hold for an hour, and you don't have to listen to miserably nerve-wracking music. You just get someone who can route you through to the solution. It could be the way to request services and to file complaints. How about requiring the airlines on our flights and the airports in their announcements to regularly announce the availability of that hotline? If more people knew how to complain, the CEO of Air Canada wouldn't be coming here telling you how few complaints they get. How about requiring the regulator to deploy secret shoppers so we have independent monitoring of how their services are? You heard from the CEO of Air Canada that they now announce pre-boarding for passengers with disabilities. Not on the Air Canada flight I was on last night to come here. How about having an assured front desk check-in in a large airport like at Terminal 1 in Toronto, where you don't have to try to brave a phalanx of stanchions and check-in machines and other confusing signage and so on, where you could check in right inside the door. Air Canada didn't have it. Let's just say somebody got an interesting idea and eventually they did have it, then they killed it, then I asked them to restore it, then they didn't, then I heard they did, but only for some flights, not others. If you can't figure it out, imagine how I feel. How about requiring that one person will guide you through the whole airport rather than being passed from one person to the next, sometimes as many as 3 or 4, like you're a baton in a relay race. We heard about the need for training. Can I tell you, and I'm just giving you my experience, lots of people with disabilities can tell you the same, how many of their ground assistance persons assigned to guide me, I have to teach how to guide a blind person. Did I mention this is not rocket science? These aren't bad people. They're in a bad system that needs to be fixed. Let me wrap up telling you that there are lots more things we could require, but how about standards for new airport design or aircraft design? I was just on a plane 2 weeks ago where, you know that emergency or that call button to let the flight attendant know you need help? It's always been a physical button, but more and more, it's a touch screen that blind people can't operate. I mean, did they just invent blind people? This is ridiculous. Now, I don't want to make it sound like it's all Air Canada. These need to be done, measures need to be across the board. Air Canada is not the leader that we want airlines to follow. We need them all to become leaders.
Thank you.
And to change their practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lepofsky. Next, we'll go to Ms. Walkus. Ms. Walkus, the floor is yours. Oh, Ms. Walkus, unfortunately, you're on mute. So I'll wait for you to unmute yourself, and then we'll restart the clock for you.
Thank you for letting me know that. Many people like to use the mute button with me. And thank you for having me here. I have been involved in the federal transportation industry and disability since 1979. I was so happy when we finally got regulations, not voluntary codes of practice, that went into effect in June 25th, 2020. Let me tell you, for someone who's been involved internationally and nationally around disability and travel, I thought, what could possibly go wrong now? 2019 looked like we were going to get there in 1 year, right in the middle of the COVID shutdown. Do you think the airlines and the airports stopped at that point? No. They asked for exemptions, exceptions, extensions for putting in mandatory regulatory areas that they had to deal with, that they had a full year ahead. And all of a sudden, because of COVID, oh, we can't do it now. We had to take the disability community and fight that request of the federal cabinet. And we had to have a global reaction to that. We should have been looking after our own people during that time, but we couldn't. Our people were hungry. They couldn't use cash. They couldn't get proper healthcare assist. We were hurting in the disability community, and yet We mounted a campaign against the airlines to stop taking away the regulations we had fought for dozens and dozens of years. This is not new. Everything we try to do to make change with the industry. Now, we're not just talking about Air Canada. We're talking from buses, interprovincial buses, to the interprovincial ferries, to Via Rail. We have had to fight every inch of the way. I noticed last month that some of the discussion was around one person, one fare. The Council of Canadians with Disabilities were the ones that went to court against Air Canada to ensure that we had one person, one fare. Then one of our members followed that up with another court case to allow room for guide dogs and service dogs to be able to stretch out because they immediately had to work after getting off a carrier. Since those times and since those very important court cases, we've also went against it Via Rail because they were buying inaccessible rail cars. And we fought them. We won that. And the big principle that came out of that fight, that legal fight, was you cannot end a barrier by creating more. So we have regulations that embody those, some of those legal precedences that we set from the disability community. We didn't get any help. We had to do that on our own. We're still doing it on our own. And the biggest issue right now is that systemically, it is not accessible. If a person wants to utilize one person, one fare, every carrier does it differently. Every carrier wants a doctor's certificate. Every carrier uses a different type of certificate. They undermine what has already been won, and I call it a death by 1,000 cuts. Every time we try to enact what is already in place, there's some new barrier to change that we have to then fight that. It's like whack-a-mole. Every time you try to do something, it hits. I'll tell you just a few of the ridiculousness that David was talking about is that I met up with a person who had just started on the accessibility desk for Air Canada at YVR. She was shaking. It was her first time she'd ever met a person with a disability. And it's a good thing I'm a nice person because I helped her through it. And I spent more time supporting her. But she, through 2 weeks in a classroom, had never met a person with a disability. The question I have is, why is it everyone's talking about us? Everybody is doing their best for us without us. We've been here. We are always here. We are not stakeholders. Stakeholders come in, set the parameters of rule of what they're in charge of. We are rights holders. When you look in the Constitution, Section 15, people with disabilities is in there. It's at the very end because in the first draft we weren't included. We had to fight for that too, but we're there. And every time we have to mount yet another campaign, another legal challenge, it takes people away from their families, from their regular life, and we are all volunteers. We are not paid to do this. I am the chair of the largest, oldest disability rights organization in this country. We are 48 years old. We have run mainly by volunteers, and we have made great strides to get us to where we are, but we need you. We need this committee, and I'm so blessed to be here. We need this committee to not just give recommendations, but to follow them through. I would have loved to have sat in this morning and been able to ask Air Canada questions. This big summit that's happening in a couple of months, the disability community has never been consulted around that. We need to be at the table with the same authority and speak from that same authority to ask the questions of Air Canada. They wove a pretty picture this morning, and some of it is pretty. They have done some good work, and they have great staff. But systemically, when you try to get through with them, it's impossible. And I want to leave you with a very ugly picture. WestJet, when a person who's larger than the seats will allow, within one person, one fare, that legal fight saw obesity as a disability. And when you have to get that seat, then the meeting process is you have to have your butt measured. You have to put it on paper. A doctor has to sign it off, try finding a doctor. And then you have to send it in. WestJet has an algorithm that they spent a lot of money on, and it is proprietary. And they take those numbers and they decide whether you get the extra seat or not. It is demeaning, embarrassing, expensive, and why many people with disabilities are not traveling anymore, because they're harmed.
Thank you.
They're harmed through the process. So I'll leave it there for now. I'd love
Thank
to
you, Ms.
answer any
Walkus.
questions.
I didn't want to cut off your opening remarks. I just want to make sure that all the members here are able to ask you the questions they need to ask you and to get your point of view and your expertise on record. We'll begin our line of questioning today with Mr. Strahl. Mr. Strahl, you have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lepofsky, I found your comments about being handed off 3 or 4 times in an airport like a baton, I think you said, to be interesting. We've been talking about making sure that people are treated with respect, with dignity, and are provided a good service from the time they get out of their vehicle or whatever transport they've used to get to the airport until they're seated in the aircraft. So can you perhaps talk about whether your comments were focused largely on Air Canada? I assume that's who you've had the most experience with. Has it been any different when you've traveled with any other domestic Canadian airlines? And when you travel, for instance, you referenced the United States. I see in some prepared remarks here you've also traveled to Israel, et cetera. Where have you had the best experience in terms of, and with what airline, in terms of not being passed from person to person through the airport?
Thank you. Number one, I've talked a lot about Air Canada, but it's not limited to Air Canada in terms of my experience in Canada. Number two, my better experiences is anywhere outside this country. I'm sorry to say that. And I'm embarrassed as a Canadian to say that. But it proves others can get it right. Why the heck can't we? When I talked about being passed like a baton, for the longest time, for decades, at Terminal 1 in Toronto, you came through with one person taking you from the airplane all the way through customs and getting your bags and out the door and into a cab. Now, because some geniuses put their heads together and thought this was a better thing, for the last 10, 15, 20 meters, maybe 50, you have to be passed to an airport authority person. Literally, for the last few meters. And you spend more time having the two ground officials taking your boarding pass and scanning that you're leaving one and being passed to the other one than it takes to get out the darn door. Try that after a 13-hour flight when you just want to get home and go to bed. When you come in at Toronto, again at Pearson at Terminal 1, and I'm just going to give this as an illustration. We haven't audited right across the airport. We can't. We're volunteers. But it's important for you to understand this. You come into the counter, and then they tell you to sit and wait, sometimes upwards of an hour, but the seats aren't right next to where the staff are. So you're sitting there for an hour. You can't ask somebody, hey, where's the bathroom? A couple of flights ago, I actually thought they had forgotten me. There's no one to ask, so I just stood up. I heard someone sound like an airport, and how's this for dignity? Standing up and bellowing, "Excuse me, do you work for the airlines?" Like, why should we have to do that? Similarly, on the way out, again, depending on this baton passing, you could be escorted from the aircraft to a seating area before you go through customs and then told to wait, someone will come and get you. You ask, how long? They don't know, and they leave. There's no staff there to ask. I've sat there hearing somebody in another seat next to me saying, I need help. I need to go to the bathroom. This is an adult in public in an airport. Welcome to Canada. This is not the way we should be treated.
And this, in all of these experiences, you have, obviously, when you've booked your ticket, informed the airline that you require extra assistance, and they're still unprepared to deliver a seamless service.
It's totally inconsistent. There are times you get, the people are nice. Don't get me wrong. The people are nice. They're not surly. They don't need sensitivity. Excuse me. They need staff sufficient and a system that says from the aircraft all the way out the door. Some do it. It varies from day to day, flight to flight. And yes, in my file, before I do a booking, it's automatically set out that I have a vision disability and that I need ground assistance. And usually when I book the reservation and I get the electronic ticket, it says it right there. But it doesn't tell you who to call for help. One last thing, just getting from the front curb into the airport. Why should this be so complicated? Why can't there be a one-stop phone number to call? Instead, you've got to figure out different airlines do it differently. And if you've got the wrong number, there's nowhere to call to get the right number. So it's just, anyway, none of this is tough. This just requires, and by the way, the last thing, and I want to focus on this just for a minute, sir, if I may. Senior executives of airlines need to be held personally accountable. Not just that they can hire a Carrie-Ann Wilson, who's a really good person and really dedicated, and then tell people like me, go talk to her. That's what he told you. When he was pressed about would he meet with me, it was, well, me or her. It would be good to talk to her. They need to not be shielded by people. They need to talk to us directly. And I'd be happy to if he would be agreeable to meet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strahl, and thank you, Mr. Lepofsky. Next, we have Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to our guests today. Ms. Walkus and then Mr. Lepofsky, maybe you can make comments after the fact, due to question here. We've heard from WestJet, Air Canada Airlines, we've heard from airport personnel from CATSA, who've all claimed they have some sort of assistance programs in place. Yet, we've seen and heard of the stories of mistreatment and neglect, some of which you've alluded to today in your travels. So can you speak to, Ms. Walkus, first of all, to the end-to-end service and potentially share where you think the gaps are in the airline industry?
Okay, in the airline industry, the gaps are right from the time you try to get online and book a ticket. Most of us have to then go through the medical desk, and then depending on who's on that desk and how they feel that day, there is no consistent way that the regulations are even looked at. They look at their own personal policies. So that will determine whether you actually get a seat or a seat you need. And they predetermine everything from whether you get the second seat for a guide dog, whether you get the second seat for a support person. And by the way, they charge you taxes on that seat, which they're not allowed to do, but they do anyway. So that needs to be resolved. When you get to, and as David alluded to and said, every airport is different. Winnipeg, they now have a kiosk, unfortunately. It has, when you get to the curb, it has flat screen, so someone like me who's blind can't use it. Vancouver Airport, you call the main number. but it doesn't have a code for accessibility so that you can just call someone. If you call over to Ottawa Airport, they do. They said, if you're coming to the curb, press 3 and I'll get somebody. And somebody actually answers the phone and talks to you and arranges what time you'll be there approximately by the taxi. And they're there waiting for you. And as David said, there's no consistency. Every airline that flies out of this country does not follow the rules of Canada because they're all domestic. We need to change that. I don't think Global Affairs should have make a decision on what is right for Canada, whether we're going to go after and make changes, that those regulations also are for international. I personally have spent 4 hours parked at a gate waiting for a flight. No one's come to see me. No, there's no way to contact anyone. I'm having to go to the washroom. I can't get something to eat. I cannot use any of the airport services. We're moved like luggage from one end to the other. And sometimes, as David said, there's 4 or 5 people involved. The way they move us is really demeaning. Sometimes you have to climb up onto a cart, a golf cart that physically you may not be able to get up on, and they put their hands on your hips and they push you up onto it. And then when you get to the other end, they might park you at somewhere and you have to wait for a person to show up with a wheelchair. And then that person will take you to another section where they drop you off again. And so it's this constant going through and not being able to even grab a bite to eat because most of the people that are helping you are not assigned to help you from the airlines.
Could I ask you
actually have to run back.
Ms. Walkers, could I ask you if some of the training that's alluded to by the airline people is improving the situation any?
I think the training is, the attitude is different. I've noticed that in the last few months that I travel. But what I'm noticing too is that they're not empowered to make decisions on the ground. When something comes up with a person with a disability and you say, oh, I need this. Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to take you to get something to eat. And they have to check. So they're not empowering their frontline people and making them feel like it's okay that they made that decision, what was best for that customer.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lepofsky, could you elaborate on some of the things I referred to there? And
sure. With respect to training and all the other things Air Canada said, they're doing all this, but we are still having the same problems. Ergo, we need substantially more legislated, enforced systemic solutions. That's the 19 that are in our brief. Number 2, let me say with respect to the issue of training, here's another systemic problem. I've had somebody guiding me recently in an airport, and I've said, oh, do you do this? Is this your full-time job? They said, no, they rotate us. Sometimes they're on the front desk, the check-in desk, sometimes they're elsewhere. So if they're trained, they may not actually put that training into effect till much later. If we train them, we seem to have to do too often, again, they may get rotated somewhere else after. Why not have a team of people with, this is what they do? Again, do they need a retired lawyer and part-time law prof to tell them how to do this stuff? What are they paid for? Seriously.
Ms. Walkers, back to you again. So you believe the companies like WestJet and Air Canada, which made $2 billion last year, according to the CEO, should be investing in new aircraft, new technology to better serve Canadians and passengers with accessibility needs? And what kind of equipment or pieces, things that you have thought about or promote to the companies?
Okay, one of the things is when you get on and there's that flat screen in front of you when you sit on an airplane, I can't use it. And it has 90% of the information about what's going on that airplane on it. It isn't a talking screen and it's flat. I don't know, there's no buttons to push. So I pay the same fare as any other customer on that plane, yet I can't use that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers, and thank you, Ms. Walkus. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Earlier on in the testimony from Air Canada, we were told that only 0.15% of cases were those of... Sorry, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. I just want to make sure...
The translation?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm you were. Excuse-moi, Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Go ahead, you may continue, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. So what I was saying is that Air Canada, or its representatives, were saying that they have 0.15 or 0.15% of cases where there are complaints from people who have mobility aids or persons with disabilities. You seem to be you seem to travel a fair bit yourselves, Ms. Walkus. Is it true that it's only 0.15% of the times that you travel that you have problems occur? How frequently do these things actually occur?
For me, 95% of the time. In fact, I can't remember one trip that there wasn't a major issue for me, either almost missing my flight or being parked somewhere. It's almost every time. And again, as David said, we are spending an inordinate amount of time training their staff.
Monsieur Lepofsky?
Mr. Lepofsky?
Disability, I talk to about this, and I get lots of feedback in my leadership role with my coalition. Everyone has had problems. I'm not meaning all the time. I don't even know if it's most of the time. But whenever we get on a plane, we never know what we're in for, and we have to be ready for the worst. But let's take that statistic and let's tear it apart. Most of us, I think, I certainly can say for myself, I have not filed complaints about 99.9% of the incidents. I wouldn't have time to eat, sleep, or do anything else if that's all I did. Number two, I dare say most people don't know how or where to file complaints, even if they want to. That should be announced in the airports. That should be announced on every flight. That should be included on every ticket. Number three, lots of people travel on our airlines but end up outside Canada. And when they get back to their home countries, if they've had a bad experience, you think they're calling up to find out which regulatory agency deals with the problems they faced and how to file a complaint, and they're going to get involved in some long legal process? I don't think so. So when Air Canada comes up with those numbers, or any other airline, they're, forgive me, but they're in effect trivializing what we're facing. Right. Now, in fairness, the CEO of Air Canada said he knows it's underreported and he knows there are more, so I want to be fair to that. But to be able to say you're doing a good job and these are the numbers is to be shockingly out of touch with our experience. And there's just a huge coincidence that the only people who happen to talk to me about this who have disabilities have had these problems, or it's a bigger problem. And I leave it to you to decide which it is.
Merci.
Thank you. That answers my question very well. Which leads me somewhere else. Mr. Lepofsky, let's continue with you. In your opening statement, you referred to the CTA, and you seem to be dissatisfied. Could you tell us a little bit about the ways in which perhaps you have had to have dealings with the CTA? You said that you don't fill out a complaint every time. What is the issue with the CTA, the Canadian Transportation Agency, as to the ways in which these complaints are dealt with?
Okay, the first problem is there's no rapid solution. I mean, if you file a complaint, better be ready for a very, very long process. And to be honest, life's too short. Okay, like we can't live that way and have a life. The second problem is they are too close to the airlines industry. It's a classic example of the recurring problem of regulatory capture. It's not unique to the CTA, it's not unique to regulators in Canada, but it's obvious. For example, if you read their regulations they passed in 2019, in our brief, we have a link to our critique of those regulations when they were under consideration. And they really read like they're written by the airlines. They're just way too, you've got to do this, except. You're required to do X, except. And then there's all these loopholes that are bigger than the rights. And so the other final point, even if you were to disagree, and I'm not saying you do, but even if we assume for the moment you disagreed with everything I just said, the bottom line is this. They are mandated to regulate airlines' accessibility. They've had that mandate for decades. That didn't come with the Accessible Canada Act. They've had it for decades. These problems have existed for decades. In significant ways, they've not gotten better, and in some ways, they've gotten worse. So the regulator has failed to achieve the result that we are entitled to. And
Thank you very much.
If you keep going back to them, I suspect you're going to get the same result.
Thank you, Mr. Lepofsky. And thank you, merci, Mr. Barcelona-Duval. Next, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to, again, thank you, Professor Lepofsky, for being here and for stating so clearly and adamantly what the problem is and the urgency of making progress on this. And I'm trying to decide where to start and how to add to this conversation with some questions. But it seems like from listening to you that the two themes that have really come up are around consistency and accountability. And I share your frustration because this committee hears from many corporations who come here and tell us about their good works from very well-meaning people. And it feels after many meetings like that it's too great of an expectation to expect these companies to proactively and voluntarily address these systemic issues. Where does the buck stop when it comes to accountability?
Number one, with the regulator that's not holding them accountable. Number two, with the CEOs. And number three, and we're not partisan when I say this, but with the ministers and the government that have the authority to do it. A summit is a photo op. Excuse me, but it's like they may discuss things, they may come out with good stuff, but they don't need to wait 2 months for a summit to deal with the 19 issues that are in our brief. And the 19 recommendations are not like something that we somehow magically innovated they couldn't have thought of, like having people know what rights they have and where to get service at the airline. I mean, my theme again, it's not rocket science. So what we need is concrete action. The other thing is, with respect to the airlines and the CTA having consultative committees, and that's great, where they bring some people with disabilities they ask, but these are recurring problems. I'm not saying anything that people with disabilities, and I believe airlines haven't known about for years and decades. So it's not that they need to hear more from us. They need to actually do something about it. And it would be wrong for this committee to sort of recommend, and I'm not saying you're going to, but to think the solution is tell each airline to set up a disability advisory committee so that we have to volunteer our services to these for-profit companies to keep telling them one after the other the exact same thing. The solution is to legislate the requirements, effectively enforce them. And that's what we've listed in our brief.
So effective legislation, effectively enforced, and the buck stops with the minister who's responsible for the regulator and for setting the parameters within which the airlines operate?
And the CEOs.
And the CEOs.
Absolutely. And I'm not trying to be personal to the CEO of any airline. It happens that one was here today. And I am sure they're all well-intentioned, but in the disability world, everybody's well-intentioned towards us. But we keep facing the barriers. So the solution is saying, if the CEO of each airline said to their airlines, no more passing people like a baton, no more seating people where they have to call out to strangers if they need to go to the bathroom. Let's tell everybody what single number they got to call for help, and it will actually get answered in, 5 minutes. not an hour? If they all did that, and if they said there are consequences down the line if it doesn't happen, it could happen.
Mr. Lepowski, why do you think the minister has been so reluctant to, or seems to be so reluctant to take that decisive action that you've just described?
I've never spoken to the minister. We've had no contact with him, and I can't comment on it. My only reason for focusing on it is because of the news release yesterday about a summit. And I don't want to make like whatever they do is wrong and all that stuff. We're not like that. It's just we need action, not photo ops. If they do a photo op and do action, we'll say yay. Okay, don't get me wrong.
So in your view, the government knows what needs to be done. They've had lots of time to do it. And in response to this litany of horrifying stories involving people with disabilities trying to travel, and we heard testimony from the chief accessibility officer, and she very much echoed what you've said, which is that every single person that she knows that has a disability and travels has had problems. Given the severity of that situation, you think that the government has all the information that it needs to act. Is that what I'm hearing?
As does the Canadian Transportation Agency, as does every airline. And they have models from elsewhere in the world they could turn to, because not everybody does it as badly as we do. And that's why I dread entering Canadian airspace. Others do it better. I'm not saying they're all 100% either, but they're more reliable than here.
What are the international leaders when it comes to the type of regulation and enforcement you're talking about?
I can't give you sort of specific regulatory codes and specifics. I'm not prepared for that today, and I apologize. But I could just tell you I don't recall a trip anywhere of the handful of countries or more that I've been to where I have to worry like I have to worry when I come here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lepowski, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, floor is yours. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both witnesses for very passionate advocacy and some practical solutions, which I know are being captured by the analysts as we look to the report on this. And I just want to pick up on the thread from my colleague, Mr. Bachrach. You said, Mr. Lepowski, right off the top that in the United States there's an Air Passengers with Disabilities Bill of Rights, and that's obviously something that we should look to because we want to we don't want Canada to be an airspace that you dread. And I know that the question was asked about other jurisdictions as to maybe others that are leaders on this, and you weren't prepared for that today, but I don't know if it would be something that you'd be able to table at the committee afterwards, if there were other jurisdictions.
If we could find something, we'd be happy to provide it.
Sure. I mean, because obviously we should look to what are far better examples than you're experiencing in Canada.
But frankly, that's also, I mean, the CTA is paid to try to know this stuff, and the federal government should have people who could come before you and give you this. You shouldn't need lay volunteers. I'm not faulting you for asking. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And to that very point, I mean, in terms of the airlines collaborating with advocates like yourself, and I'll ask the same question to Ms. Walkus, because you spoke about the fact that, Ms. Walkus, that you talked to someone who, it was the first time that ever talked to someone with a disability, which is shocking that that's the case. And we've heard the case being made for the CTA to be a better regulator, for the minister to at his summit 2 months from now to actually look at some concrete action. But what can, all of that, absolutely. What can the airlines do in addition to work better with advocates like yourself to actually get some practical solutions?
Having advisors from the disability community is not the answer. One of the problems with advice is they can take it or leave it. It doesn't empower the community of people with disabilities to bring forward the solutions or identify the barriers and expect them to change them. That doesn't happen. We've been doing this for decades and decades. This is not new. All of these issues have been on the floor for every government since I remember back in the 70s. This has been sent to the next group, this next group, the next group. Here we are again, coming to you saying not much has changed because people are trying to find the least amount of effort, the lowest cost to deal with what they perceive as the barrier. We are not at the table empowered to say, no, that's not okay. We need to have an open discussion, public, as you're doing today, with us at the table asking them so they're on record with us. Otherwise, the only place we have is the courts. And quite frankly, I'm 68 years old. Can we not just have it common sense way of dealing with this? And the transitions we need to make is that where something stops, there's a gap to the next piece, whether that's legislation, whether that's regulation, or whether that's who is responsible for what. But the biggest issue is there's no teeth in it. $100,000 fine to Air Canada, cost of doing business. It's not going to change anything. And that money doesn't come back to the disability community. It goes in government coffers. So how is that assisting us to move this forward? We are the poorest group, the least amount of power, and yet every single case of movement forward has happened because the disability community has moved it forward. And with you, we can move it even further forward. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll say you look far younger than 68. So,
Thank
but
you.
One of the things that's been fairly consistent in your comments as well as Mr. Lepofsky's is the inconsistencies in the treatment of airports and at airlines, and I guess maybe just in the remaining seconds to comment how can that be remedied best?
You have to have oversight with teeth.
Yeah. Like, again, inconsistency is in part because people don't tell us where to go if you want to get curbside assistance or have one-stop shopping. They don't have that hotline to call when you're at the airport. I mean, try to get someone at the airport to go to a higher level to solve a problem that the front desk person can't solve because they don't have authority. You can't find anyone. You need that one-stop shopping phone number with somebody with authority to fix it. You need these to be announced regularly. I think that if airline staff and airport staff heard those announcements, if you have a disability-related complaint, call this number, it'll wake people up a little more to say, hey, we should do better. And I want to emphasize, I'm going to gamble that a lot of the frustration I'm describing would be echoed by flight attendants and ground staff. Because when I've talked to them about it, they've echoed that they've seen the same problems we have and that they as individuals find it enormously frustrating.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lepofsky, and thank you, Mr. Muse. Next, we have Mr. Iacono. Mr. Iacono, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Je remercie les témoins d'être là.
I'd like to start by thanking the witnesses for being here this morning. I want to thank you for your very touching testimony, and actually, it's quite disturbing to hear the experiences you've had traveling. It's hard to believe that in 2024 we haven't managed to better serve individuals who have accessibility needs. Professor, you have a wide range of experience. We've clearly understood, and we don't have to. I'm very disappointed to hear about your bad experiences, and on behalf of the government, I apologize. I would like to ask you, how can we address this issue best? Address it. Many things need to be done, but what would be one thing that could be done to bring about change? You mentioned a one-stop shop. Is that the ideal solution? That's my first question. My second question, you said you had 19 recommendations. Did you design them based on all of your travel experience all over the world, outside of Canada as well? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you. I'll tell you that we designed those based on our research, based on feedback that we've been getting from people for, as a community coalition, we get feedback on barriers all the time. We get called by the media about stories and asked to comment on them and so on. So it's kind of an aggregation of that and just traveling and looking around and trying to figure out what works. And of course, my own personal experience is provided. I gave you illustrations from my life, not because I'm the only game in town or in any way important, but because they will make them come alive for you in a way that I think especially is compelling. But as well, we've just tried to apply common sense, like offering the idea of if it's really hard to get from the front door at Pearson Terminal 1 to get all the way through this phalanx of obstacles and a long distance to find where the check-in desk is, and there's so many, the idea of why don't you just have an entrance right inside the door, something which Air Canada did, then undid, then redid, but limited as to who could use it. I mean, again, you shouldn't... That was just one example at a big airport like that. You might not need it in Ottawa because it's a shorter distance to the counter, but at a bigger airport, that would be an illustration of something that's good. There isn't one solution alone, but what I will tell you about the 19 in our brief, the one that I realize will make this would require the most dramatic move is removing the accessibility mandate from the CTA and creating a new agency to deal with it. I realize that's a bigger fish to fry, but the other things in there are all I'd propose quite easy to do, and it's not just one of them.
Professor, just before my time is up, through you, Mr. Chair, is it possible for you to share with us those 19 recommendations?
Yeah, they're in the brief that we filed with you.
Okay, and in it, do you have the examples where you've picked them up? Those 19 recommendations?
We just invented them.
No, I'm sure you didn't invent them.
No, but we explain them.
But from which, is there a reference to where this is being done today, so we have a better picture of where to go to see how it's being done, best practices?
No, there isn't, and we could look to see whether we could do that. If we can, we will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iachino. Thank you, Mr. Lepofsky. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelo-Duval.
Mr. Barcelo-Duval. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll continue on my original train of thought. Let's keep going with Mr. Lepofsky. In your opening statement, you said that it would take legislation that would include rights for people with limited mobility, similar to what exists in the United States. Here, of course, you have airline passengers' rights that is in the form of regulations, and it's been the case since 2019. What's the difference between what exists in the U.S. and what exists here from a legal standpoint, and how could we manage to get what they have if it's any better? How could we change or amend what we've got here?
We actually quote it, I believe, in our brief, and it's theirs is just a short list of categorical, clear rights. Now, if we were writing one for Canada, if you, this committee or the government decided we're going to draft one, we might add to it, vary it. We don't need to just carbon copy it. We should take into account some of the problems that this committee has seen. But the idea of having that Bill of Rights, having it be enforceable, having a hotline, and having it mandatorily notified to all passengers when they book a ticket with the airline and so on would help move things forward. And it's not hard, and it's shouldn't be full of the feast of loopholes in the CTA's 2019 regulations. That's what I'd suggest.
Donc, ce que je comprends, c'est que dans ce que vous avez...
From what I gather, in what you submitted, you have a list of rights that people have, example, as opposed to a whole host of loopholes and complicated packages. The simple rights that are easy to interpret, that would lead to better results, according to you? So major principles, basically.
Yes. Well, it doesn't even have to be principles. I mean, the airline shall tell people passengers with disabilities what services are available and what number to reach them at. That's not a principle, it's just a clear direction. So it doesn't have to be kind of lofty, aspirational. It can be concrete entitlement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lepofsky. Merci, Mr. Barce-Duval. And finally, for today, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lepofsky started by recognizing the law students at Western who've contributed to this work, and I wanted to take a quick moment to recognize my staff, especially Margaret Crew, for her work. I understand that you were in touch with her in preparation for today's meeting. It seems like one of the aspects we're talking about is trying to define the scope and the scale of the problem that we face. And while we could take actions like the ones that you've recommended in the absence of precise and accurate data, it strikes me that it would be useful to be able to track progress over time. And to do that, we need better information about how the problem is doing. Is that a fair assumption? And if it is, what would you recommend in terms of data collection and reporting so that we can have a good sense of whether progress is being made on this issue?
Yes, it's a good idea. We don't need to wait for data to know these are problems. We don't need to wait to see how many times they've failed to announce pre-boarding, like they did on my flight last night, to know that we need a measure to ensure they announce pre-boarding. However, there are these measures. Number one, secret shoppers, not by the airline, but by an independent regulator who are auditing on site what's going on. Number two, requiring that the airlines file with the regulator all the complaints they receive. They could be, of course, anonymized. Number three, requiring the airlines at airports, as I said earlier, to publicly announce a simple, easy-to-access phone number to register complaints and an email address and a mailing address, so that those will, because we'll hear from more people if in real time we tell them that you can and where to do it. And then if all of that is provided to the airlines, not just some statistics, but what the complaints are. In fairness to the airlines, just because someone complains doesn't mean those are the facts. But you can at least look at it to see what kind of recurring patterns you see. So that if you get all of those complaints, and even if you assume that half of them are inaccurate, but you still see a huge trend, that tells you where you need to take regulatory action.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach, and thank you, Ms. Walkus, as well as Mr. Lepofsky, for being here, for sharing your expertise and your testimony with us. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of this committee for your steadfast advocacy and service to Canadians with disabilities. With that, that concludes our testimony for today, and this meeting is adjourned.